What's up, everybody? Welcome to CryptidSafari. We're out here in the field. I'm out here with my good friend Chuck Schlab. We're just doing our thing right now. Figured we'd do a little campfire interview. So, Chuck, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, my name's Chuck, and I live in Kingfisher, Oklahoma. And back in, well, I'll tell you how I got started.
Yeah, let's go over that.
When I was about 7 or 8 years old, there was a movie that came out. This was back in the 70s, probably 76 or 78, something like that. And the movie was called Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot, or Bigfoot, The Legend of Sasquatch, one of the two. And from that moment on, after watching that film, I was just drawn to the subject. And of course I knew it was a Hollywood production, and I knew that, you know, they have to dramatize some of that stuff. But one thing that really caught my interest was they told two stories during that film. One was the story about Teddy Roosevelt and how he had a friend that they went up into Montana, not Teddy, but this friend of his and another friend, they were trappers. And they went into this area that the Indians said nobody goes in there. And so anyway, that was one of the stories they talked about. And Teddy Roosevelt's friend was the only guy that actually survived coming out of there. And the story goes that the guy that was with him was actually killed by Bigfoot. And that was one of the stories that they told. And then the other story in the film that they told was the thing that happened at Ape Canyon in Washington, and how the 5 gold miners ran into several of these things at their cabin. They actually shot one of them, and then that night their cabin was attacked by Bigfoot. They tried to tear the cabin down trying to get to the guys. So from that moment on, I was just hungry to know everything I could about these things. And so I bought every book I could get, read encounters, read stories, and I always thought that if I ever wanted to see one of these things, I would have to go to Washington, Oregon, or up into Canada, Quebec, or any of those type of places. And so I kind of, you know, as I grew older, I kind of put it on the back burner, and you get involved with high school and girls and sports and all that kind of thing. So it was kind of on the back burner. And then I had my son, and my son and I used to watch Finding Bigfoot. And so I kind of got back into the desire to learn more and know more. And I never really realized that here in the state of Oklahoma, Bigfoot is here. And I had my first sighting in 2015. I worked for a oil company, water hauling company in the oil field. And they sent me to this location that was down by the river. And I get there, and as soon as I jump out of my truck, every hair in my arm stands up. So I knew something wasn't right. And this was in the month of November, and the first thing that went through my mind wasn't Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It was probably a hunter nearby, because it was like the first or second day of deer season. And so that was my frame of mind. And so I looked around the location looking for a hunter, or see if I could hear a hunter, or maybe one would holler at me, and that never happened. And so I thought, well, I've worked all night, maybe I'm being a little bit delirious. And so I just kind of put it out of my mind and started doing the job, and got in my truck and was writing out a ticket for the job. And something caught me out of the corner of my eye. I saw movement, and I looked over there, and there this thing was. standing behind a big old sand plum thicket, and there was a tree there, and he was actually peeking around the tree looking at me. And I immediately grabbed my cell phone and snapped a couple pictures, and I sat there and I stared at him for probably a minute and a half. He never moved, never blinked, and I thought, well, man, I'm really tired, you know. And so what happened then was I decided, you know, maybe I'm just so tired that I'm seeing things. So I finished the job and hopped back in my truck, was getting ready to drive off location, and when I started to drive off, I looked over there one more time and it was gone. And I never saw it leave, never heard it leave. It was just gone. And I knew then what I had seen. And from that moment on, I've been kind of doing this. And
so that pretty much hooked you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I can't imagine it wouldn't.
And so I've been on several expeditions. Mm-hmm. I went down to southeastern Texas and was in the Sam Houston National Forest with Bob Garrett.
For people that don't know that area or aren't familiar with it, what would be the closest city or anywhere that people could relate that to?
The closest place that is Huntsville.
Okay.
It's between Dallas and Houston, kind of that area.
On the east side of the state?
East side of the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that trip changed me forever.
Well, tell us what happened.
Oh my gosh. There's so many things that happened down there. I actually had several sightings. Casting my very first track down there.
I've seen that track. Is that the one that had the broken pinky
yes.
toe? Yeah.
Broken pinky toe is kind of off to the side.
Yep.
It's kind of unique.
Very unique, yes.
And it's about 14 inches long, I think is what it is. But had several sightings down there, and the most amazing sighting that I had down there, or encounter, if you will, was I didn't prepare for that trip.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about your preparation. That's kind of comical.
Well, it was the first weekend of February when I was down there.
Yeah.
And my train of thought, being from Oklahoma, was I'm going to be down by Houston. I'm closer to the equator. It's going to be a little bit warmer there than it is in Oklahoma. And so I didn't have the right equipment with me, clothes wise, and
so you were freezing your butt off.
Oh my gosh, I was so freaking cold. It was 23 degrees that night, the first night we were there, and the second night we were there.
Right.
And I didn't bring enough clothes, and I didn't bring my 0-degree sleeping bag, and so I was freezing to death even before it was time to go to bed. So I ended up I slept in my truck, and that night I'd put recorders out all around the camp, and caught some amazing audio that night. And it was about, I'd say, 2 o'clock in the morning when the audio came out. And so about 3 o'clock in the morning I woke up. Something woke me up, and I was laying there in my truck. My head was on the driver's side and my feet was on the passenger side of the truck, and I laid there for a few minutes. I was looking at my ceiling in my truck, and I eased up a little bit to look out the passenger window, and right in the passenger window of my truck was this great big huge face, and I saw his eyes, I saw his teeth. He was snarling at me. He had, you remember chiclet gum?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and that's what his teeth looked like, but on the sides he had canines. And the first thing that went through my mind was, oh crap, what am I going to do? And so the thing that I thought of was, the best thing for me to do is just lay back down and close my eyes. And the thought that went through my mind was, well, if he wants me, he's fixing to grab me. And I closed my eyes and waited probably a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and opened my eyes back up, and I leaned forward and looked out the passenger window. He was gone. And for the longest time, Larry, I thought that I had either dreamed that or imagined that.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't tell anybody about that particular event, and until along the way, I've met many people,
Mm-hmm.
have become friends with many people. One of them is Tim Kumbo Baker,
Mm-hmm.
and Tim and I talked quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And one night we were discussing what had happened down there, and I told Tim this story, and Tim told me, he said, "Chuck, that really happened to you." And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" And he said, "Because when I was 4 years old, one was peeking in my bedroom window, and the same thing happened to me." And he said, "What happens is when you have an experience like that or an encounter like that, your mind tries to play this game of that didn't really happen to you. You imagined it, or you dreamed it, or
So
something like that."
it tries to rationalize it.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically. Yeah.
And so after Tim and I had talked about that, my whole demeanor changed about that particular event, and I realized inside of me that, yeah, that really did happen.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't something that I imagined or dreamed. It actually took place. And so when I came back from that trip, my whole life kind of changed, and my passion, that passion that I had when I was a little kid, came back to me. I wanted to know more about these things. I wanted to see another one, and so that's what I strived to do over the years, the last couple years, and started my own show, and kind of like what you're doing. And I've met a lot of great people along the way, and hope to continue. And I met you. I think you called me one time.
Sent you an email.
Sent me an email wanting to talk to me.
Yep.
And so we got in touch, and
Yep.
we've been friends ever since, and we've been out together. In fact, we went out with Kumbo one time and met DDoS, and a lot of great people along the way.
Several people. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that time that outing, which was actually my first time to meet Tim. And it was actually our first major outing. We went to Sulphur, Oklahoma.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that. That was a unique experience.
It was. Sulphur has had sightings over the years around Arbuckle Lake, and we went out. How long ago was it? It was about 2 years ago.
It's a couple of years ago now,
And
if not 2.5.
Again, I think it was in the fall. I think, if I'm not.
I think it was early spring.
Was it early spring?
Yeah, I believe it was
Okay.
end of March.
And Tim is a great individual to do research with and to go out with. Tim can find these things like nobody's business.
Yes, he can.
He knows about them. He's been researching them ever since he was, well, I don't know, probably 45 years or more, I would think. And so we would go out to different parts of the state of Oklahoma, and we had some. I remember one night we were sleeping in my tent, I think, and we woke up the next morning and there was ice all over my tent.
Yes, there was.
But lucky for us, I think we were prepared for the cold that time.
We were.
That trip.
We were. Yes.
So we had a good time. We went to several different places, and we met Dee on that occasion.
Yep.
And Dee kind of showed us a little bit about Brown Springs and told us a few stories. And Kumbo talked about Brown Springs too.
Yep.
And so you know, it was a great trip. Mary Fabian was with us, and I love Mary to death. She's good people.
Yeah, Mary's great.
And her sister was with us.
And she actually had her first sighting down there, didn't she?
Yes, she did. She had her first sighting down there, and I'll tell you a little bit about that story. And, of course, you were there. But we were, where were we? Was it Tishomingo?
We were in Tishomingo at that time.
Tishomingo, and we were out on the wildlife refuge, I think.
Yes. Yep, you're right.
And drove down a road and stopped, and everybody got out. And we kind of had this thing, or Tim has this thing, that when we do that, we get out of the vehicles and we sit for 15 or 20 minutes and just listen to the night sounds so our ears can, you know, get in tune to what's actually around us. And as soon as we stepped out of the pickup, Tim was messing with his FLIR, trying to get it in focus, and I was right behind him, and I hear him go, "Oh crap!" And I was like, "What's going on?" And he goes, "One just walked right in front of me," and I think he said it was like 5 feet from him at the time. And so we all immediately got our spotlights out, and we were spotlighting the area where it went back into the woods. And about probably 5 minutes later, we see this great big huge wild hog coming across the road in front of us. And so we all scrambled for our guns, thinking we're fixing to get a herd of hogs. And that didn't take place. But it was kind of unusual because the hog walked in the same direction that the Bigfoot went. Across the same spot, went into the woods, the same area. I apologize for my dipping.
It's all right.
And as time progressed, we actually saw two more come out of the wood line probably about 100 yards from us, and actually stepped out on the road. And we caught their eye shine, and so we started walking down that way. And needless to say, we got kind of close to them, and they kind of walked right back into the wood line. So we drove on. We went back to our vehicles, drove on down the road a little ways, and as we're going down the road, as we're coming back, there was 4 of us, I think, in my pickup.
Yes.
Me, Dave, and Mary Fabian and her sister, Debbie. And Debbie was sitting behind me. I was driving, and as we're driving along, going out of this area, Debbie says, "I think I just saw one." And I thought she was playing with us. And I said, "Oh, Debbie, you did not see one." And about that time, Mary goes, "My sister does not lie." So I knew then that, you know, she had seen something. And so I started asking her questions. I said, "What did you see?" And what she saw was one in a tree, in the V of a tree. And she said it had its legs hanging over the side of the tree, and it was holding on like a kid would a swing. And she even had somebody draw a picture of it. But the amazing thing about that was Debbie was scared to death of Bigfoot. And she wouldn't go out with us at night. She had to this night, though, because we were going to be gone so long. And after she had that sighting, we saw a completely different change in her attitude. And the rest of the night, she had my window rolled down, and she was hanging out my window with a flashlight, with a spotlight, seeing she wanted to see another one.
Yeah.
And that's what happens a lot of times when Bigfoot's involved and people have their first encounter, their first sighting.
Right.
And some people just the opposite, but with her it was a good thing.
Let's talk about, you'd mentioned DDoS. Now, Dee's been a friend of ours for a long time now.
Yes.
We've actually done quite a bit with Dee.
Yes, we have.
Let's gear that a little bit toward Brown Springs. That first time I believe it was in a summer. It was in August.
Oh, it was miserable.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. That was one of the that was an amazing trip.
It was. Dee talked us into, or not, I don't think it was Dee that actually talked us into it, but there was a group of guys that wanted all of us to come together.
Mm-hmm.
A Texas group and then the Oklahoma group. So we decided to do that, and you know, like you said, it was during the summer. It was hot. Bugs were everywhere. I mean, it was miserable. But the most interesting thing about that trip was we went down where the old river channel was, where the Red River used to run. And I think you and Dee were on one side,
mm-hmm.
and then me and the other guys were on the other side. And as we're walking down there, up ahead of me about 50 yards, I see a structure of some kind. And I told the guys that were with me, I said, let's be real quiet. I said, there's a structure up here.
Now, was this during the day or the night?
This is kind of about dusky dark.
Mm-hmm.
It was getting that way.
Kind of about now.
Yeah. And so what happened was I get within probably 30 yards of the structure, and we can see the door to the structure is right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was black. The inside was black. You couldn't see inside of it. And I pulled out my camera with the zoom lens, and I clicked the picture, and when I did, the flash popped up and flashed, and when I saw it, I see two eyes. I saw eye shine inside
mm-hmm.
of this structure, and it looked like, to me, and I think you could vouch for this, it kind of looked like an igloo, mm-hmm. almost.
Yeah, well, that's what I'd relate it to.
Yeah, and so one of my guys had a thermal imager, mm-hmm. and I told him, I said, hey, Barry, get up here. We got something in the structure. And so he comes up there with a flare, and he actually catches a heat signature laying on the ground mm-hmm. inside the structure. And about that time, off to our right, we start hearing trees snap, we start hearing stomping going on, and we start hearing whistles. And that's when I called you and Dee.
Mm-hmm.
We had walkie-talkies,
mm-hmm.
and I called you guys and said, hey, guys, get over here. We got something in the structure.
Right.
And so you guys came over, and Dee's amazing because everywhere Dee goes, when he's in a location, he whistles a tune.
Yes.
To let them know that he's there. And so when you guys showed up, immediately Dee started whistling, mm-hmm. and the noises off to our right stopped. I mean, it was dead quiet.
Yeah.
And you guys kind of, you went up on the bank, mm-hmm. and Dee was kind of at the entrance of the structure, and Dee decided to go up around kind of where you were, and he said that what he saw was something go into the sandbank that this structure was leaning against. And
thank you for listening to CryptidSafari. If you've had an encounter, no matter how otherworldly, unexplained, paranormal, or just plain crazy, and want to be on the show, email me at cryptidsafari@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.